I began right in Willoughby in 1948, attending this very building, starting in grade 4. Never more than about 25 kids in the whole school. A couple of times there was one family at one point they had 5 of the 25. Another one had 6, and sometimes there weren't 8 grades, but most times there were.
Farm people would come in with their kids, and they would be here a few years, and then they would be gone, depending, which farms they were living on and where they were working. But there was a staple of the Scotts and the Leslies and the Gunnings that were kind of here. And then the Branscombes moved up, and there were 4 of them. So that was another group that took over a lot of seats in the school.
We weren't bused, there was no school buses. Regardless of the time of the year, we lived about a mile from the school, and you'd walk or you'd bike. If the weather was particularly bad, you'd get a parent that would drop you off. But most of the times in the winter, you just walk home and, have a snowball fight.
We had a huge pond, and it would freeze, and it would be frozen for months. My birthday's in November, and I always had a skating party for my birthday. Now you would drown. I mean, it doesn't freeze at all. And the school, the little, association, they would have a couple of skating parties with music and bales of hay out and lights and hot chocolate and things like that. I mean, that skating was a everyday after school type of thing.
We would play, there was a field of sorts here where the Parks building is in behind. And we'd have, you'd go out and play softball. We would have inter-school games with the various other SS. SS1 was up at Black Creek, and SS3 I think was back on the Sodom, and 4 or 5 was on Lions Creek Road. And they're all within probably 5 miles perhaps, and the kids would bike from one school to the other.
And when I was, I think grade 6 maybe, they had a bus come every 2 weeks on a Wednesday and take us down into the city for home economics. First at Princess Elizabeth and then at Princess Margaret. We had a music teacher that came, I think every week, Laura Willick, to play and do little Christmas concerts and whatnot. Well, I remember on Mondays, we all got our assignment of what we were doing. Everybody, you could sweep, or you could make Mrs. Willick's tea, or tidy the cloakroom, put the books away, give the books out, and then at lunchtime you had to hold the water fountain so people could wash their hands. And you had, of course, no lunchroom. You had to sit at your desk. And as you got older, you moved back because you got bigger. The seats were graduated, so that the bigger, older boys usually were at the back.
I had 3 sisters. 2 of them attended this school. My youngest sister, Gwen, I don't think she got I think they closed this one just about as she was coming into school, and she went into Chippawa, to Riverview, I believe.
When they closed the school, when I was in, I think it's about April of grade 7, they sent the 6s, 7, and 8s down to Chippawa, to the basement of King George, with the 6th, 7, and 8th from Lions Creek, and they left the younger ones here. And then they closed it that June, and the teacher moved to King George. And I have spent, since I was 2 years old, living on the Parkway, and I love it. When my parents came up here, there were 2 houses between Chippawa and where they lived. That's a lot of empty space, and there was nothing behind them at all. It was all farmland. It was a different parkway than what you now see. It was really empty, very, very empty. And watchdogs were always around. I had a police dog that was with me continually so that I could go outside by myself, and it wouldn't even let my grandmother near me. It was strictly a watchdog.
I've been out here in the Parkway since '73. It's changed remarkably, this Parkway. In the late 80s, early 90s, I was a realtor. You couldn't sell properties along the parkway. Now, they tell me there's lots up this parkway that are priced at 400,000 and up. There's not that many available, but, and then of course then they have to service them with septic and water.
That's why you don't see any subdivisions or any resort trying to get in motion because of the how would they handle the septic?
There's no city water out here, of course.
We have a well in the river and we pump it then through, and we also have a special I guess it's an ionized system so that we can drink it.
So the majority of people, I think, have a line into the river. Back in 1948, what most of them have, it was just a direct pipe into the river. There weren't the shore wells and stuff that they have now. So Dad had this, so it went, and it went into the river, but sometimes in the winter, if the river level was lower, there might be part of that pipe exposed, and you could be down there trying to build a fire in the middle of the winter to thaw the pipe out. And I can remember in the very earliest days where you would get up and you'd run some water into the basin, and I still remember little crayfish coming out through into the basin live.
At various times of the year, you've got different things, and depending on what Buffalo and Fort Erie are putting in, all the salt, because they put the snows in that's been salted, they plow it all and dump it in up at Fort Erie. So in the spring, you have quite a heavy amount of salt taste in water, even though you're not drinking it. We usually clean our teeth with it, whatnot. You didn't ever drink it at all. It was just straight from the river.
My mother met my dad working at the Niagara Falls Review way back. His name was William Bruce. He was with the Review all his adult life until we sold the paper in 73. He wrote a column until he was about 83 or so. In my years in the newspaper, full-time, I was more on the business side. My dad loved the news side of it, and so it made for a nice combination. One time there was 3 of us in the paper. My granddad kept an office until probably a year, well, maybe he was 91 maybe.
My dad had bought the farm maybe 20 or 30 years before he farmed. He was a businessman who loved to farm but knew he could not make any money farming. And I don't know anybody locally who actually could make money on farming. Everybody farmed, but they had to have another source of income if they wanted to do it. Willoughby clay is phenomenal. It's nothing like being in St. Catharines in the good soil or Queenston in the good soil. When I was younger, we had Holstein cows, so we sold the milk to Borden's Dairy, and they took it in. And when Elsie the cow and the twins would come to town, they would stay at the farm. Elsie would bring her little twins, and they'd be at the Welland Fair, or they'd be on display somewhere.
My grandfather, he used to love telling this story. He was just going into the depths of the Depression, and he got a call one morning at breakfast, and the voice on the other end said, "This is Harry Oakes. Mr. Leslie, this is Harry Oakes." And he said, "Yes." And he said, "I'd like to buy your farm." Well, Harry Oakes had struck gold, and he was the only one in this whole part of the world that had any money. Everybody else was, including my grandfather, and was really struggling to keep things going. And so Oakes said, "I'll give you a certain amount," which was, for that time, incredible. My grandfather got off the phone and spoke to my then grandmother just to make sure it wasn't a dream or, So he called him back. He says, "You've got a farm."
I'm a swimmer. I love the water. And at the farm there was a really nice beach, but my dad was petrified of water. And by the time I was, I would say 7 or 8, we had the first pool, and the Leslies put one in at the same time because I would disappear out into the current, and of course I could swim, but nobody else was very sure that they could get me back. So that was, so I didn't swim too much after that because it is a very, very strong current. Not that many people swim in the river anymore. There are too many private pools, and again, the current. If you wanted to swim across to Navy Island, you had to have a boat with you, and you had to start way upstream so you could hit Navy Island. Now they even have the markers for, it's called point of no return. You can't go past there, which is good because then people who aren't familiar will realize that they have to turn around coming back up. Unfortunately, my son did once, and we had to have him rescued by the fire department. The boat quit. He phoned and said, "Mom, I'm in trouble. You got to get some help." He said, "I can't get the boat going." He was at the point of no return at those markers. We had 3 really good anchors because you don't want that current to take you. So mainly people go up towards Fort Erie when they boat, and then they can drift down or whatever. They don't. Not many people go past Navy Island.
So the Niagara Parks Commission is going to take all that land back of us. Over the next 3 years, it's going to become a field bird grassland sanctuary. They're going to have things like milkweed to try to get more monarch butterflies, and Dufferin Islands. There's the parks proper. There's all kinds. The rec trail. Many people take call it the river, but the whole park system for granted. We're blessed in Niagara to have all of this stuff.